Right now, if your mind starts falling apart, there's a system for that. You book an appointment, you drive across town, you sit in a quiet room, and for exactly 50 minutes you try to untangle what modern life has done to your nervous system. That arrangement feels normal to us, but for almost all of human history it would have sounded absurd. Ancient humans had no therapists, no clinics, no diagnoses, no self-help books, no mental health apps reminding them to breathe, and yet they still dealt with grief, fear, trauma, heartbreak, anxiety, jealousy, loss, conflict, and death. So why didn't they need therapy? The answer is not that ancient humans were mentally tougher than us, and it's definitely not that they didn't suffer, they did. The real answer is stranger than that. For most of human history, the things we now pay therapists to help us rebuild were already built into daily life. Let's clear something up first. This is not a story about some prehistoric paradise. Ancient life was hard, children died, people got injured, food sometimes ran short, loved ones disappeared, violence existed. Mental distress existed too. Hunter-gatherers were not immune to depression, fear, or breakdown, but their pain lived inside a completely different human environment, and that difference changes everything. Because therapy at its core is not magic. It is something much older. It is being heard, being regulated by another person, finding meaning in chaos, naming pain, telling the truth out loud, being seen without being abandoned. Modern therapy does this in a specialized, professional form. Ancient humans often got many of those same functions somewhere else, from the group, from ritual, from movement, from nature, from shared grief, from unstructured time. From a life that was difficult, yes, but not emotionally designed to isolate you. That's the part we miss. We assume ancient humans needed therapy less because their lives were simpler, but maybe they needed therapy less because their lives were less psychologically fragmented. For most of the 300,000 years our species has existed, humans lived in small bands. You didn't wake up alone in an apartment. You didn't commute in silence. You didn't spend all day performing competence for strangers. You didn't suppress your emotions at work, then process them later through a calendar link. You lived around other people constantly. You slept near them, ate near them, worked near them, walked near them, raised children near them, grieved near them. If something terrible happened to you, it didn't disappear behind closed doors. It entered the camp, and once it entered the camp, it stopped being yours alone. That matters more than we realize. Because the human brain is not just built to think, it's built to co-regulate. Your nervous system is shaped by other nervous systems around you. Safety is contagious, so is panic. Calm can spread, so can despair. And for ancient humans, there was very little of what modern life produces in enormous amounts: private suffering. Today, you can go through a divorce, a layoff, a panic spiral, or the death of a parent while still answering emails, paying bills, and pretending in public that everything is fine. Ancient humans had fewer walls to hide behind. That sounds primitive, but it may also have been protective. In many hunter-gatherer societies, survival itself depended on radical interdependence. Food was shared, childcare was shared, knowledge was shared, risk was shared. A bad day for one person didn't automatically become a private psychological crisis because life was organized collectively. In some foraging groups, sharing dramatically reduced the risk that one household would go hungry after a failed hunt or a bad day of foraging. Think about what that means psychologically. Modern stress often feels so crushing because failure is individualized. Miss a payment and it's your problem, lose a job and it's your problem. Burnout, and now you have to fix the burnout too. Ancient humans had danger, but they had less of this specifically modern terror, the terror of being personally responsible for surviving inside systems too large to control. And that may be one reason they often coped differently than we do. But social support is only the beginning, because ancient humans didn't just live around other people, they lived in ways that continually discharged stress through the body. Walk long enough through a city and you'll see what modern stress looks like. Rigid shoulders, shallow breathing, jaw clenched, eyes locked on screens, bodies sitting still while the mind runs marathons. Now imagine the opposite: walking for miles, climbing, digging, carrying, squatting, sleeping in darkness, waking with light, listening to wind, insects, fire, and other people. Ancient humans were physically active not as exercise but as life. And movement changes the brain, not because it makes you productive but because it metabolizes stress. Your body was never designed to experience threat while remaining motionless all day. It was built for stress that moves: a rustle in the bushes, a failed hunt, a storm rolling in, a conflict that erupts and then passes. Acute stress. Concrete stress, stress with an object. Modern stress is often the opposite: abstract, constant, unfinished, deadlines, status anxiety, debt, future planning, social comparison, notifications, performance reviews, low-grade dread with nowhere to go. Ancient humans had fear, we have chronic activation, and those are not the same thing. Then there's childhood. This part is easy to overlook, but it may be one of the biggest clues. In many hunter-gatherer groups, children learned through observation, imitation, and play. Adults intervened less. Mixed-age groups were common. Kids were not shuffled from one rigidly managed environment to another all day long. Learning happened by being inside life, not by being extracted from it. And infant care looked different too. In many hunter-gatherer communities, crying babies were responded to incredibly quickly, often within seconds. Infants spent huge amounts of time in physical contact with caregivers. Care was distributed across multiple people, not concentrated almost entirely onto one overwhelmed adult. Think about how different that is from modern life. Today, we isolate parents. We separate families. We reduce village life to two exhausted adults, sometimes one trying to replicate what used to be done by many hands. Then we act shocked when people are drowning. Ancient humans did not have perfect childhoods, but many had something modern families often lack: a wider net. And when people grow up inside a world of touch, responsiveness, participation, and constant human presence, that likely shapes how the nervous system learns safety from the very beginning. So no, ancient humans didn't have therapists, but they may have had something more foundational. They had conditions that prevented as much emotional strain from becoming chronic internal collapse. And then there's ritual. This is where the story gets really interesting. Because if you remove therapy from a society but leave people with grief, fear, trauma, and conflict, something else has to absorb that emotional weight. Ancient humans had ritual: singing, dancing, chanting, trance, shared mourning, storytelling, ceremony, initiation, burial rites, healing rites. We tend to look at these things as superstition or entertainment, but that might be a serious misunderstanding. Rituals do something to humans. When people move together, sing together, grieve together, or enter altered states together, they don't just express culture, they regulate biology. Synchrony builds trust. Repetition creates containment. Ceremony gives suffering a shape. Modern people often experience pain as meaningless interruption. Ancient people were more likely to place pain inside a shared story. That doesn't make the pain disappear, but it changes what pain means. And meaning is not a small thing. A person can survive a shocking amount of suffering if it feels held by the group, explained by the culture, and witnessed by other people. Modern life is rich in information and poor in ritual. Ancient life was often the reverse. And this matters because therapy is, in part, a ritual too. You go at a set time, you enter a specific place, you speak in a structured way, someone listens without interruption. The chaos gets turned into language. Week after week, the ritual slowly changes you. Sound familiar? That's because humans have been building containers for pain long before psychology invented a vocabulary for it. Some of those containers were shamans, some were elders, some were songs, some were fireside stories, some were mourning customs, some were initiation ordeals that taught people how to suffer in public, not just in secret. Ancient humans did not lack healing practices. They lacked our kind of individualized, professionalized healing practice. That distinction matters, because the title of this video is slightly misleading on purpose. Ancient humans did need help, they just usually didn't need to outsource it to a stranger with a degree. Help was already woven into the tribe. Then something changed, actually several things changed. Agriculture, permanent settlements, stored wealth, property, hierarchy, specialization, cities. Once humans stopped moving with the land and started building systems, emotional life changed with the economy. In small bands, if someone became too controlling, too arrogant, too dominant, the group often pushed back hard. Status had to be kept in check, boasting was mocked, hoarding was discouraged, equality wasn't a moral luxury. It was social survival. But larger, more stratified societies made hierarchy normal. Now some people had power over others, some had land, some had armies, some had servants, some had nothing. And once hierarchy becomes stable, stress changes form, it becomes social comparison. Humiliation, obedience, dependence, fear of falling, fear of exclusion, fear of failing in public. The group stops being just your safety net, it also becomes your ranking system, and that is a psychological revolution. Because the more complex society gets, the more your mental state becomes tied to institutions you cannot personally influence. Your crops fail, your taxes remain, your ruler changes, your labor belongs to someone else. Your community expands but intimacy shrinks. Then industrial life takes that pressure and turns it up to maximum. Now work is separated from home, time is measured, identity becomes specialized, children are trained for schedules, adults sell hours, grief gets hidden, weakness gets privatized. And people learn to perform stability instead of living inside it. This is where therapy starts making perfect sense, not because humans suddenly became fragile, because society became emotionally unnatural. We created a world that systematically strips away many of the ancient buffers that once protected the mind. Constant companionship became optional, shared rituals declined, elders lost centrality, childcare fragmented. Movement collapsed into exercise, nature became scenery, belonging became conditional, and suffering became increasingly private. Then after all that, we wonder why anxiety, loneliness, and burnout feel so normal. Here's the strangest part. Modern life has made us more comfortable in many ways. We have antibiotics, heating, air conditioning, anesthesia, therapy itself, all of that matters, but comfort is not the same as regulation. Convenience is not the same as belonging, and safety is not the same as peace. Ancient humans had less comfort, but in some crucial psychological ways many of them may have had more built-in regulation than we do. More touch, more eye contact, more shared labor, more unstructured time, more communal meaning. More emotional witness, more physical exhaustion of the healthy kind, more daily evidence that survival was collective. And maybe that's what the modern mind is starving for, not a return to caves, not some fantasy of primal purity, just recovery of the conditions under which human emotions make more sense. Because a lot of what we call mental health treatment today is really an attempt to artificially recreate functions that used to happen more naturally. The therapist becomes the attentive elder, the support group becomes the tribe, breathwork echoes ritual, somatic therapy returns us to the body, nature retreats imitate the landscape we abandoned. Inner child work points back to developmental wounds shaped by isolated childhoods. Even the language we use now, holding space, grounding, co-regulation, attachment, integration, keeps circling the same ancient truth. Humans heal in connection, always have. Which means the real question is not, why did ancient humans never need therapy? The better question is, what did they have that did some of therapy's work before therapy existed? And the answer seems to be this: they had tribes instead of networks, ritual instead of pure analysis, movement instead of chronic stillness, presence instead of constant distraction, shared burdens instead of private breakdowns, belonging that was lived, not merely discussed. Of course, we shouldn't romanticize them. Ancient humans were not enlightened emotional masters. Some suffered terribly, some communities were harsh, some people were traumatized. Some would absolutely have benefited from forms of care we now have. And therapy today can be life-saving. For many people, it is not optional, it is essential. This is not an argument against therapy, it's an argument against forgetting what therapy is compensating for. Because maybe the reason so many modern people need professional help is not just that we are broken. Maybe it's that we are trying to solve individually what humans once survived collectively. That changes the whole picture. It means your anxiety may not be just a personal defect. Your loneliness may not be a private failure. Your burnout may not be poor time management. Your numbness may not be laziness. Your emotional exhaustion may be a perfectly human response to conditions no human nervous system was designed for. And once you see that, something uncomfortable comes into focus. Ancient humans didn't need therapy less because they felt less. They needed it less because the structure of life itself was doing more of the healing. We built a world of locked doors, private grief, fragmented families, abstract stress, and chronic isolation. Then we built therapy to help us survive it. Again, that doesn't make therapy fake. If anything, it makes therapy one of the most honest things modern civilization has ever invented. A place where, for 1 hour, another human being helps carry what the tribe no longer can. But it should also force us to ask a bigger question. If so many people are overwhelmed, medicated, lonely, and emotionally exhausted, maybe the problem is not only inside individual minds. Maybe part of the problem is the world those minds are forced to live in. Because before therapy existed, humans still cried, still grieved, still panicked, still feared death, still lost people they loved. But they did it inside firelight, inside ritual, inside touch, inside story, inside a circle. We do it inside traffic, inboxes, rent payments, noise-canceling headphones, and glowing screens. And maybe that's the trade we still haven't fully understood. So why didn't ancient humans need therapy? Not because they were above pain, not because they had no trauma, not because life was easy, but because much of what the modern mind now pays to recover was once built directly into being human. And maybe that's why, even after all our progress, so many people still feel like something essential is missing. Because therapy may be modern society's way of giving us back in tiny weekly doses what ancient life gave people every single day. Presence, witness, meaning, belonging, and the feeling that your pain does not have to be carried alone. If you've ever felt like your anxiety or burnout is a response to the way modern life isolates us, tell us your thoughts in the comments below. Let's talk about it. And if you want to explore more hidden psychological truths about human nature, hit subscribe and join us next time on Pencil Stick.